everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, where we'll be talking about agile transformation journeys and how they'll fail without quality QA. My name's Ollie O'Donoghue, and I'm an analyst at HFS Research, and I'll be the host for you today. I'll be joined soon by Joe Moore, who's the Senior Director SQE at LexisNexis, and Shashank Gupta, Senior VP and Service Offering Head at Emphasis Validation Solutions. But first of all, before we kick off, I will narcissistically go through some slides and data from HFS, just sort of set the scene. First of all, the one thing I will say is that please do ask questions as we go through the webinar. We've got a little bit of time towards the end to go through any questions as you send those through. So do please get involved in the conversation and ask anything, and we'll put that to Joe and Shashank towards the end of today's webinar. So for those of you who are familiar with HFS, you probably wouldn't have got far without seeing the HFS Digital One Office framework, which is sort of how we view the utopian dream of digital transformation. This is the digital end state that organizations are fighting to get towards. And now the reason I'm presenting this at the start of the webinar is it'll help set a bit of context around some of the changes that we've been seeing going on in the market as part of our conversations with enterprise leaders and service providers about some of those huge piece of transformation work that are taking place out there. Now, as a snapshot, the Digital One Office framework is a blending of all of the operations in the modern enterprise. So at the front, we have the customer-centric digital organization. That's where we have the outcome-driven front office, where all of that cool stuff like touchless interaction, real-time personalization, and customer-driven process design happens. But the clincher is that stuff can't happen without the empowering Digital One Office at the back. That's where we have the digital underbelly, which is where, as an analyst, I spend most of my time taking a look at cloud and automation of processes and unification of data. Then we have intelligent support functions, where we have autonomous and agile working culture. We'll be talking a little bit about agile today, inclusive digital mindsets, unification of outcomes, and lean and design thinking. And we have the neural network, which is where all of those cool technologies that we talk about so much these days, like blockchain and IoT, machine learning, cognitive, and predictive analytics take place. And as an example of why this is important, you really can't do real-time hyper-personalization without some of those technologies sitting in the background. Now, a lot of organizations are spending a lot of time, money, and resources trying to get to this end state. And I think what we need to talk about today really is the role of testing and QA when we go down this path. It's a huge piece of work. There's a lot of technology and change management involved, but how seriously are we taking QA? And without it, will we really like the destination that we're all aiming to get towards? Now, with that in mind, here's a piece of research we did towards the tail end of last year that took a look at the investment priorities for a lot of organizations. Now, this is important for what we're talking about today because it shows you just how much focus and investment is being placed on a lot of technology. There's a lot of moving parts in the modern digital enterprise. We've got RPA at the top, 53% of organizations placing significant investment and focus there. Cloud, IoT, analytics, blockchain, AI, all of that good stuff. And even drones and driverless vehicles are getting a bit of a look in the modern enterprise. So there's a huge piece of work for testing and QA teams to make sure that all of this stuff is doing what it should be and is being plugged in the right way to have a meaningful impact on the enterprise. And we've got all of that going on against the backdrop of an incredible pace of change. Absolutely incredible pace of change. And again, this is a piece of research we did towards the tail end of last year, where we asked enterprise leaders how much their operations and operating models were changing to reflect the increasingly digital world. Now, at the time, 22% were facing existential change and 26% were facing significant change. If we look over to the far right of the screen, it's a slither of facing no change or little change. So this is impacting everyone. Now, where it gets frightening is we asked them to think what it will look like in the next 2 years, and that pace of change is accelerating rapidly. So by kind of towards the end of 2020, 27% of organizations will be facing existential change and 31% will be facing significant change. And again, that'll be one of the points that we'll discuss in a little bit more detail perhaps later on, is the speed of change is having a big impact on how we're rolling these technologies out. Now, speed of change and that huge shopping list of technologies is one thing, but organizations are really struggling to actually get anywhere right now in scaling these solutions and making sense of them in their business. It's a really interesting and sobering statistic here when we asked enterprise leaders how significantly their firm's culture is holding back progress when it comes to making those real digital investments. 51%, so over half of high-performing organizations said culture is holding them back from reaching their digital transformation journey, either somewhat significantly or highly significantly. And again, when we start talking about Agile, which is as much about culture as it is about anything else, we start hitting these roadblocks and we need to start doing things carefully. That's not the only problem a lot of enterprise leaders have. Here's another interesting piece of research we had that I'd like to pull in just to set the scene. And what makes this interesting is we spoke to two different stakeholder groups, so the business C-suite and the IT C-suite. What's interesting is by and large, they agree with the same problem. So the business C-suite, their biggest problem when trying to reach that digital one office framework is legacy thinking and a lack of digital mindset from the business and from IT. Now, the IT teams feel that even more acutely. So even more acutely, the business and IT don't have those mindsets. But their biggest issue is a lack of talent internally. And again, what makes that relevant to the conversation that we'll be having is we'll be talking about a partnership that helps leverage some of that talent to help IT out and help them get where they need to be. So that's sort of designed to set the scene a little bit, so we're all on the same page. But let me just introduce our panel, who will be talking about this QA journey that they're working on. So I'd like to welcome on Joe Moore, who's the Senior Director in SQE at LexisNexis. Hello, Joe.
Hello, all. Sorry, I had a problem with the mute button there.
Happens to me all the time. So hi, Joe, and you're being joined by Shashank Gupta, Senior VP and Service Offering Head at Infosys Validation Solutions. So hello to Shashank. Welcome on board.
One.
Hi, Shashank. Great. So I mean, Joe, you're kind of on I guess the enterprise leader end of this debate. And it's fair to say that the burden on modern IT is growing as they kind of balance this increased speed and this complexity. We saw that huge shopping list right at the start there, and then that huge pace of change. From a QA perspective, how have you seen things change? Are things changing for you over at LexisNexis? Is this a bit of a moving feast for you?
Yeah, things are definitely changing. I mean, it really goes back to the core, though, from the standpoint of I've been in IT for 30 years, and it's always been better, faster, cheaper, right? And in today's world, faster is certainly the key that we're driving toward. And with Agile and continuous integration and continuous deployment, it really raises the bar on the QA testers from a technical standpoint, where we're used to, we highly valued people with much of a business acumen, very much black box testers, manual testers. In today's world, their skill set has to change, and change very rapidly to be able to do automation, performance testing, security testing, all of these types of things, which were in the past have been specialties that are now really more of a broad-based tester and critical to the success of a tester in today's world.
And how has QA become an integral part of your operations? Because I mean, what strikes me, and full disclosure, I sort of come from a public sector IT background, so I've seen some really great stuff and some really bad stuff at the same time, and it strikes me that sometimes QA can almost be a nice to have rather than a must have when we talk about this speed and these huge technologies and this existential fight for survival. So how have you wrestled with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a challenge. As long as I've been in the industry, the development teams have always wanted to do away with QA as a cost-saving measure, right? And I think that really has become true, even more true in the Agile world, as there's more of a shift left and developers doing more of their testing and those types of things. But what the QA professional brings to the table still to this day is a different mindset to the test. What we see with the development staff is they typically test what they coded, not how the system necessarily works. And so, but it is a constant struggle there from a standpoint of ensuring that that we are protecting the brand from a user's point of view. And I think with keeping that QA mentality on board really ensures that overall system view, as opposed to, well, my feature, my function works perfectly, in very siloed approach to delivery.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's a really, I mean, I wanted to get those questions in, just sort of set the scene with my jaded outlook. So perhaps you could give us a bit of a run through on the journey that you're on over at LexisNexis, just to set the scene for the audience.
Yeah. So we, if you want to pop to the next slide there. Yeah. So we engage, so just for a point of reference, I have front office, back office, and our content systems testing today. And we engaged with Infosys back in 2008 and 2009 in these areas for their support. We'd use them in our customer-facing applications, Lexis.com, Rosetta, those types of products that we offered in the past. But when we started to re-platform the back office and content systems, we engaged with them there. Because in these areas, we did not have a good process in place. And it was kind of hit or miss in how we tested. And so we engaged with them to bring process to the table and become part of our testing center of excellence. We had a high focus on regression automation at the time, and they really helped us bridge that gap and reduce our cycle times. And then in 2016, we began the Agile journey, which anyone who is undertaking that knows that it is going from waterfall to Agile development is a huge mind shift. And what Infosys was able to do for us very quickly was bring in the right resources to the QA team with the more technical expertise, more automation in that space, and really get us up to speed with automating within the sprints, as well as maintaining a good regression suite. This would have been impossible to do bringing in with full-time direct employees in that short a period of time. So we really relied on their power and their staffing ability to bring that in, and that's been very, very successful. And you can go on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we were transforming from waterfall to Agile, doing CI/CD. They brought in the BDD automation, really led that whole effort on several of our sprint teams. They brought the SDET skill set and the transformation there. And what's really nice is that, if you look here to the results, 100% automated smoke test and BVT that runs automatically with the builds, 82% in-sprint automation. I actually would argue and say that it's a little bit higher than that. We typically are hitting 100% automation in that space, but average 82, and maintaining an 85% of the overall end-to-end regression test suite. So these are really big metrics, very important to us. Just this little bit of result here enabled us to reduce our systems integration testing cost by 50% last year. So that's a huge savings for us, as well as a time savings. We can go on to the next slide. Really, when we look at Infosys brought the overall process to how we approach testing today within the front office and back office systems. They brought in the tooling strategy, the automation strategy, the shift left approach, and really the end-to-end testing and the continuous integration. Without them, we would not have been able to get as far as what we've had. We're using, they did a great job of training their resources on Selenium, Java, and Gherkin, and really upping their skill set on a continuous basis to keep us where we needed to be. And I think that's the end of my slides there.
Great. Yeah. I mean, so it's the question that always jumps out to me at this stage is, have you noticed a major shift in the expectation of kind of enterprise on QA as you've progressed through this journey? So do different business stakeholders look at QA in a different way now, or are you under even more pressure as you go through this?
Yeah, I think that, I have more interaction with our business counterparts today than I ever have in my career. They look to QA for that, really the pulse of where the system's at. And I think it's, in the past, they had, these large waterfall certification tests and they could follow that. Now it's more conversational. Where are we at? What do you think my risk is? And it's much more risk-based versus what is what's the result of your test cases today. So it's more conversational, and they do have a lot of faith in what we're doing, and really look to our opinion on a daily basis as to where we're at with things.
Okay. Now, I mean, Shashank, just to deal you in, you're coming from the service provider perspective, so you have a kind of a broader perspective, helping a range of different organizations that are on this journey. Have you seen a major shift in the type of organizations you work with as they grapple with this challenge?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we, given the fact that we are providing services to leading banks, the retailers, the telcos, insurers, and so on, we see each of our clients' needs are slightly different from the other, but clearly there is some commonality to what we are seeing in the pattern. Today, Agile is kind of synonymous with what our clients call as digital, and all of them are in some form or shape taking their digital journey of their own. And given their context, different things may be of priority or importance to them. So if I can request you to go on to the next slide, and then I'll walk everybody through on what I'm talking about. And as you can see on the next slide, there is a pentagon on the left. At the core of the pentagon, you really see the 5 different stages, as we think are the life cycle of a digital enterprise. Our clients, whoever they may be, whichever domain of business they may be, are trying to do something, if not everything, in that area. They are either trying to do something about the experience of their end customer, they're trying to derive insights from the usage of information and the data that they're collating from their end customers, or even if they're in a B2B world, just looking at transactions that are coming in, the data that is coming in, the orders that are coming in, and trying to derive insights on what could this mean to me and my business. They are looking at ways to innovate their business model, because it's no longer doing the same thing differently, doing it faster, but it's also doing it very differently. And they realize, you spoke about that early on in the slide, it's an existence risk for many of our clients. They realize that if they do not innovate and change the way they do their business, and leveraging technology and agile ways of bringing about that change, they may not even exist in that business. So they are in the innovation journey. There are many clients who are on an acceleration journey, where they're trying to do things much faster than before. Having waterfall releases, Joe spoke about it, which could last 6 months, 9 months, a year, are no longer relevant. It's just a question of, is it 9 days or 9 hours, or sometimes even 9 minutes. So that's the kind of pace and speed that our clients are talking about. And with all of this change, the rate of change being so high, how are you ensuring, from an assurance perspective, that you've not broken anything that was supposed to work? Because it's easy to do things faster and try and look at something else. But if there is an impact on the core business and something is broken, you're not assured it right, then there's a huge risk that you run. So in our experience, as I said, our clients are on different legs, if I can call them, of their digital transformation journey. And in our view, really, is to see that how can QA and testing provide that seamless value the way it has been providing in the past. And what you see on the right is what we've tried to talk about, is that our value, we believe that the assurance in the context of agile and digital world will come in 3 forms. One, how can we help elevate the customer experience? This is the end customer experience, not the experience of our customers, but the experience of their customer. How can QA help drive and increase agility in terms of time to value, so that our clients and their businesses can derive greater value from what they are doing today? And while doing all of these things, we are able to minimize the risk, because it's about the brand. Joe spoke about making sure that the brand is not compromised in anything that we are doing. So those are the key things, and I think in the new world of digital, those will be the imperatives for the QA teams, while the focus on coverage and traditional definitions of quality will remain. But these will be the new measures by which the success or failure of a program and how QA is adding value will play a key role. What we have tried to do also is talk about how these these outcomes, these QA outcomes, map onto the different lifecycle stages that our clients are focusing on in terms of the experience, accelerate, assure insights, and innovate. But that's essentially, I see the change in the market. The clients are focusing on different things. Therefore, the QA teams also have to focus on different things to be relevant in this new world. What you see on the outer side of the pyramid is really our response to that. Rather than just saying this is important, we also invested in creating tools and platforms that can help our clients achieve what they really want to achieve. Because as I said, and Joe said that earlier too, time is of essence. It is very, very critical that we do focus on different aspects of our client's journey, but do that as quickly as we can. If I can request you to move on to the next slide. Now, while all of this is happening, another key conversation that becomes very, very important and very relevant is the focus and importance of AI and machine learning in the context of agile projects, as well as in the context of the digital projects. And before I even go there, if I have to just go back to the last slide itself, when Joe spoke about what is happening with LexisNexis and the Infosys teams involved in it, clearly there was a case of how the Infosys teams, bringing in the right skills, were able to drive the speed and agility in the context of what LexisNexis was trying to do, and still ensuring through regression suites, through instant automation, that we were able to ensure that we are not adding any new risks by trying to do things quicker, but at the same time de-risking it much more than it was ever before. So essentially, we've been able to put that in practice through this relationship and the partnership that we've had with LexisNexis. So coming back to the AI, the notion of AI. Now, if you think of traditionally, the testers or the QA organizations started off with focus on domain skills, understanding the business, being able to write end-to-end scenarios, traceability metrics, and so on. Now, that really brought more effectiveness in the way you went about testing, because that was the focus and the need of the hour maybe a decade back. Do you understand my business? Can you test it thoroughly end-to-end and so on? Soon came along automation. Now, that brought in the focus of leveraging technology and automation to bring in more efficiency and productivity improvements in the way we went about doing things. And now, in today's age and time, we believe that by leveraging AI, in addition to the domain skills and the skills around automation, we will be able to drive greater focus on optimization, prioritization, and also help build self-healing capabilities, which leverages the underlying domain skills and the knowledge repository that we have to reduce the dependence on humans and be able to take decisions much quicker, which is one of the key things that is going to be very relevant in the context of Agile. What you see really are the four use cases as we see a broad categories of themes where AI will play a role in the context of QA and what we call as the intelligent automation. Just like you have applications of these very similar in our day-to-day lives, we try to call out how that will play a key role in the context of agile transformations. There will still be tasks that humans will do, but we do believe that AI will start playing a key role in assisting the humans in doing these things faster and optimize the effort. We are already seeing applications of it where we are able to predict certain defects based on patterns, based on the logs that we see from the development environments, past history of defects, and so on. We are able to estimate using the machine learning algorithms. If you move to the next stage, we believe that humans will not be able to do certain tasks without AI being involved in it. And that's where we are looking at. Can we go back to the previous slide, please? Ollie? Yeah. Humans will not be able to perform certain tasks without AI. These would really involve validation for dynamic image analysis. It will talk about the changes to scenarios and test coverage, and realize you will be testing a lot more things which are unstructured, which are not standard UI, text-related information, and so on. So you will need the capabilities to be able to test those as you start moving more and more into the digital world and trying to do them quicker in an agile world. You will see a shift soon and we're already seeing a shift where AI is becoming primary and assisted by humans. Alexa is very popular in our day-to-day life. Same thing is becoming popular in the QA world as well. We are not just testing chatbots, but we're also using chatbots and our implementations of Alexa technology to become test advisors to managers and scrum masters in helping them prioritize their tests, give them a quick status of how things are happening, run what-if scenarios, and so on. And last but not least, we don't see a time very far away where the intelligent systems using deep learning will be able to test the applications themselves. And these will become very important, again, in the context of agile transformation, simply because time is of essence. Skilled resources will be of scarcity, and therefore AI will start playing a much bigger role in the agile transformations. Last but not least, if I move to the next slide, we'll talk about what have we done and what do we see purely from a quality engineering perspective, and how are we driving this change. And some of these Joe spoke about are things that we've already implemented with LexisNexis, and similar things are also happening with a lot of our clients. If you look at if you expand the test cycle of the larger quality engineering services, you would realize that there is an element of test design that plays a key role, and where you're seeing a lot more focus on BDD-based automation, TDD, BDD-based automation. And I already spoke about AI/ML. Those solutions will play a key role in that area. Data is going to become extremely critical and important in the context of Agile, because everybody talks about Agile testers and technologies and tools and pipelines, but you are only as fast or as slow as the weakest link, and data is seldom focused on, and that becomes an area where things just come to a grinding halt because we have not focused on data enough. And that's an area that we believe will become important. How can you have automated data provisioning? How can you have data masking? How can you have subsetting of data? And all of that things happen in automated fashion, so that as Agile testers, Agile teams, Scrum teams are working on projects, they do not get slowed down due to lack of data or overstepping on data. The third thing that becomes very important is an automation framework. An automation framework cannot be limited to UI alone, because when you are having release cycles that are in days or in weeks at best, you need a framework that can cut across right from component level to middleware to end-to-end. And that's something that is extremely important for the teams to do. Joe spoke about how we have built an automation framework using Selenium, and it really pretty much works from the point the code is checked in, and the entire automation kicks in from there. So it's not just about automation when the system is completely ready and doing SIT, but it's automation as the code is being built and checked in, right from that level, component level tests, security tests, performance tests at that level, all the way till end-to-end tests. And shift left is going to be an extremely important strategy that the full stack automation suite will enable. Last but not least, another important aspect is about the environment provisioning. And this is going to be a key role, because you have to spin up environments very quickly, maybe micro environments for developers to identify, troubleshoot, and fix the problems, and so on. And as I said, as our clients are at different stages of maturity in their agile transformations, we have seen them adopt all of these practices at different stages. But a matured organization would really have focus on all of them as we go along. To back it, to really make sure that all of these things work very well, you need a continuous feedback process that enables you to fail fast, learn quickly, and fix that into your next releases and so on. And from a skills perspective, you obviously need skills which are T-shaped or S-shaped skills or Z-shaped skills. I mean, you can name any alphabet that you wish to, but the point is that the skills will be a combination of technology and domain in equal or different proportions, but definitely we'll need to have those skills together for us to be successful in really achieving the agile goals that we're trying to achieve through the transformations. So that really is the key to achieving transformation. And we truly believe that the QA teams have a key role to play in our clients' organizations as they are taking up these journeys. There are specific enablers that we have Infosys have also built, which are enabled on the right-hand side for you, but I'm sure there are many others outside in the market that our clients are using themselves. But the key is that, the point here is that the QA teams have a key role to play in the agile life cycles. I will take a pause here, and if there are any questions on how we see the world and how things are happening around from different engagements, here examples on things that we spoke about, specific to LexisNexis, as I spoke about. We have implemented many of the things that we spoke in the previous slides, and we are on this journey for the last couple of years. And a few things that I spoke in the previous slide are also in the process of getting implemented in this partnership. Ollie, over to you.
Thank you, Shashank. So we've got quite a few questions tumbling in. So I just want to remind everyone in the audience there, do ask questions as we go along. We still have a little bit of time towards the end for a decent sized Q&A. Before we jump to any of these questions, you ended on the importance of Agile there. So I just wanted to ask both of you, perhaps starting with you, Shashank. Have you seen any myths around Agile and DevOps that you've come across that you want to use this platform to dispel? I've spoke with a few practitioners who, some, absolutely obsessed, others a little bit more cynical. So have you come across any myths around Agile and DevOps?
The mix, as in, Ollie, if you could clarify when you said mix, what would you?
Oh yeah, so things that everyone believes but aren't necessarily true when it comes to practice, I suppose, is the best one.
Okay.
So one of the ones I came across earlier. Oh, go on, sorry.
No, I will. No, you're right. So there are many myths about this. Obviously, it means many people feel that if you adopt Agile and DevOps, you're going to be faster. You will win the race, whatever race that you're running. It's going to be cheaper, and you don't need QA teams to do it. Developers themselves can do what is required. And I think all of them are wrong. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying many people want to use the word Agile DevOps, if I take a very extreme step, to not follow any processes, to not have a structure to what they want to do ad hoc things and label it as Agile and DevOps. And I think nothing can be far away from reality than that, because to me, if you have to do something that you were doing in 6 months, in 6 days, you need far more structure, far more discipline in doing it. So when people try and not do processes and call them Agile, that's just the wrong way of doing it. And Agile, by the way, does give you benefit of time to market if you do it right, but it's definitely not cheaper. Because you are doing things repeatedly. Yes, over time you will bring automation into it, but it's not necessarily cheaper because you have things that are done repeatedly. The same thing that would have been probably tested a little later once, now will be tested probably 6 times, twice a day. But it does bring in quality early, and if done right, yes, it can give you the advantages that you should have. But just saying I'm doing Agile DevOps will not give you the benefit. Also, it's a discipline that cuts across not just the development team or the testing team. It cuts across multiple teams. There is a development team, there's a testing team, there is the business team or whoever, the product owner teams who are giving requirements on the fly, willing to change. There is the team that's provisioning environments. There is somebody who's working on data. So the entire support ops team, they all need to be enabled, from a mindset perspective and from any trainings on tools and technologies perspective to be able to truly deliver the value of Agile and DevOps. Seldom it just looked in isolation to say, I will get 4 developers and I have my DevOps team up, or I will implement 2 tools and my pipeline is ready. It is a step in that direction, but by itself it is not. And we have seen many clients who've taken that step, hurt very badly, and then come back to the old ways and then try it with more practice and more rigor and more planning. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we hear it. We hear a lot of people go, "We're going to go and do some Agile now," and that that's it. That's the thought process. And it doesn't matter if we damage anything, because we do fail fast as well. So that's fine. We don't need to do QA. I mean, Joe, let's deal you in here, because I imagine you've come across a fair few myths on your travels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I agree totally with what was just said. There is a conception that Agile is going to be cheaper. You're not going to need a QA team and all of that. I think that the reality is that QA is much more important as you move to Agile and to CI/CD. And it's also a change in mindset for the entire organization of quality, which is really easy for an organization to say that, hey, we are quality focused. But the shift from being date-driven to quality-driven is a very difficult one to make, especially in a world that the majority of the people you're working with came from a waterfall world where they threw it over the fence and QA tested it and put it in, and then it went on to production. Now it's really that the quality has to start up front, and if that doesn't happen, your Agile journey and your CI/CD journey will definitely fail.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So, I mean, one of the interesting conversations I had up in the run up to this webinar, so we've had a lot of people really interested in reaching out kind of in the run up, was that actually if you're in a multi-supplier environment, so if you've got a variety of service providers delivering services into your organization, then a really strong QA function is almost the only way of policing those engagements almost, and making sure people are delivering what they should be delivering, and it's one of the most commonly forgotten about aspects. So we've got a lot of people who are very interested in the automation part of what we've just been talking about. So we've got a question here from Saurabh, which is, you touched upon test data management. Can you please elaborate a little more on how we can automate these? So Joe, perhaps, I don't know if you've got any advice for Saurabh there.
Well, it is something that we struggle with as well. So in our environment, we typically bring data down from production to use for test. But currently we're looking at ways that we can create our data in our systems versus bring that copy down and create data on the fly. It is a huge challenge, though. We have very large, complex systems that have tremendous amounts of data in them that we need to be able to process. So, I don't really have a good answer other than test data management is a huge challenge, I think, for a lot of companies right now, and it's a journey that we're all on together to find what's going to work out best for us.
Shashank, in your travels, because again, you'll kind of have touched on a variety of different organizations. Have you come across any that are making headway with that particular challenge?
Oh yes, I think a lot of our clients are making a lot of progress on it, because they realize that testing with a variety of data is critical to them, just because the way their business is. They have different scenarios of data for which the system needs to be tested. And what they have done is, the traditional way of test data management was very simple. The testers would create their own data in Excel spreadsheets or CSV files, manually create different user IDs, passwords, bank account types, so on and so forth. But as the complexity increases, it's not that easy to just create synthetic data by ourselves. So now there are tools available that will help you take volumes of data from production, so that the referential integrity is maintained. You have a variety of data that is really required for testing, the volume of data that is required, mask that data for any sensitive information, credit card numbers, social security numbers, first names, phone numbers, whatever else, mask that data, and then from that point on, create a layer, a management tool, using which a test data admin can provision portion of that data to test team A, to test team B, to test team C, so on and so forth. Now, the idea of doing all of this is that you are not stepping on each other's data, because that's one of the issues that we have seen in the past. It's common data, everybody sees the same data. One test goes, overwrites the data that somebody else was planning to use, and so on. The whole test data management process essentially has multiple steps, right from creating data or extracting data, then, as I said, masking data for sensitive information, subsetting data and using it in different environments, and so on, concept of gold copy that you can use. So it is a very formal discipline today, and a lot more of our clients are using that discipline because their businesses are getting more complex. The data that they are dealing with is getting more complex because they are now dealing with far more different kinds of customers working in different geographies. The laws and the rules of the different geographies in which they work are different, requires them to have different kind of data and different policies. So it is becoming a very, very important discipline, not just in the Agile world, but more so in the Agile world, simply because, as I said, this is one area which is not thought through enough, but really slows down the testing because there isn't just enough data to test so many times, especially when you're iterating and creating different things each time.
Great, thank you. I mean, here's another question on the automation line. So I've got a question here. How do you prioritize what's automated? It's not always clear what will give us the most impact. So I mean, perhaps starting with you, Joe, how did you prioritize what to do? Was it more obvious for you what would deliver the most value in the direction you were going in, or did you have to do a bit of a prioritization exercise?
That's a really good question. And it's bigger than what it appears on the surface. I mean, I think that in the Agile world and CI/CD, the most important thing is that you really need strong unit tests that are automated. And the shift really turns from automation through the UI to those lower level tests. You're never going to be able to keep up with the pace of Agile development with the traditional functional UI automation tests. So, you know, what you're really looking for is a high code coverage at a unit test level. And from that, looking at more of your end-to-end test for your regression or your traditional automation. So you're more looking for less outlier testing in your functional testing and more what is the normal approach through the system. So yes, we did go through prioritization, but it really didn't change from what it was in the waterfall process. Because if you think about your normal regression, you're really looking at your end-to-end. Is everything still working the way it's supposed to be doing? And so we really focused on that. And if you have a strong, robust automation suite, you can continue to build on that. And over time, you don't have to make as many decisions of what should I test and what shouldn't I test. It's more of what do I have time to validate and how quickly can I do that. So your automation has to have I guess more fail points in it that are you can relate directly to what feature or function is failing versus the overall process failed.
Great, thank you. And Shank, from your angle, I mean, is there kind of a go-to approach for you guys at Infosys for how you prioritize? Is it broadly similar?
Yes, I think the way Joe answered that, we agree with what Joe said, we do. But I want to give a slightly different perspective to the way we approach automation in addition to what was said. In the past, we would look at the business prioritization or criticality of the test cases as one of the key criteria to say, this is important, this needs to be automated and ideally into regression suite, because the whole idea of automation is you automate things that you will run multiple times. Now we're doing it slightly differently because we realize a lot of our clients have a different problem. They do not have a problem of automation. They have a problem of plenty. They have too many scripts, either they are available manually or too many scripts are already automated. And given the focus on time, they really want to first optimize what needs to be tested and then automate that. So in the past, the answer was very simple, just automate everything. Now what we do is using, and I spoke about this briefly in the context of machine learning and AI, we actually optimize the suite that needs to be even tested because there are overlaps, there are things that are very similar across test cases. So there is an important weightage that you will attach to testing each script and saying, what is the ROI for me to test the script versus the other, which is very, very similar. And if the ROI is lower because it takes more time to do all of these things, then you would rather skip or eliminate some of those tests. And then what is left is what you really automate. So you are now moving from a point of automating everything to crunch time to say, can I eliminate certain things and then automate the rest? And that's a significant step saving in terms of time. So that's the additional thing that I would say, in addition to what Joe said, in the way we are approaching automation today, is to say, first, can I eliminate certain things that do not need to be automated from a strategy of automation identification perspective, and then automate the rest.
Okay, that's cool. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so staying broadly on those points, now Shashank, you did a really interesting kind of guides to how AI is encroaching in the space. I mean, I used to be an IT practitioner myself, so the idea of having kind of an Amazon Echo on my desk and saying, Alexa, can you tell me how that laptop's being repaired, how that's going on, and then kind of Alexa repeating all that information back to me made a huge lot of sense. But we've got a question here from McChankcha. How do you envisage AI as the core of QA, especially in areas like self-healing scripts? So do you have any kind of points for McChankcha there?
Yeah, I think that's a good question from Akanksha in terms of the AI being the core. And let's be honest, we are not there yet, but I must tell you that we're making big strides ourselves, and we see around us with some of our partners in terms of how AI is being leveraged today. I spoke about how AI, and the examples that I just walked through, AI is not just for one thing. It started off as just assisting humans in certain things. Today, we actually are doing proof of concepts on the other extreme, where we are actually having AI learn based on past tests, past domain knowledge, past assets that we have created to be able to write scripts by itself. And the whole concept of AI, for anybody who is familiar with AI, will know that it takes time. It's like aging wine. The more data you have, the more it learns, the better it gets. So there is no easy answer to an AI solution today. And as all of us start investing tooling around AI, and we feed it the right amount of data for it to learn, correct itself as it goes along, the accuracy and the coverage that the AI-based scripts, self-creating scripts will be significantly higher. And they will heal themselves too, because they will learn and they will realize that what they said was fail before is not really a fail, and that some of that is part of the training of the data and the scripts itself. And beyond that, as it runs more, as it gets exposed to more systems, it will correct itself. That's the whole idea of AI. It just learns with time. You have to give it enough time initially to be able to learn and then start using it for real scenarios. Beyond that, it just learns by itself.
Great. I think any comparison to a fine wine is immediately a winner. So that's great. Here's a really interesting question. It's very current, and we've had a lot of conversations actually with enterprise leaders, seemingly over the last month or so. So I don't know whether there's something going on out there. Nobody's told me, but people are talking about it. And the question is, what has been the experience of the panelists with Agile in the ERP world? And what have been the key learnings to help clients embark on this journey in SAP Oracle scenario? So, I mean, I'll hand over to Joe to start off with, just in case have you got any thoughts on this? Is this something that you're looking at or have embarked on in the past?
Yeah, I saw that question in the list there, and I really don't have any experience in that space. I mean, we use Oracle today, but I don't have any insight into how we would handle anything differently in that area.
No, it's fine. So the burden is on Shashank.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. I'll take a shot on that. So if you think of ERPs and how are they different from bespoke applications? Bespoke applications by design are custom built. They start from scratch. No two requirements are the same. And therefore, you're having to build it from scratch pretty much and iterate as you go along. Now, with ERP world, by very virtue of the fact that it's a package, it's pre-configured, you are only trying to make configuration changes and not really build it up from scratch. Because if you are, then it's no longer an ERP, right? So therefore, we have seen that the adoption of what is being called as Agile or DevOps in ERP, and we've seen a mixed bag. Many of our clients talk of Agile in the context of ERP, but they are mostly talking about how can they do faster releases and so on. But essentially, the amount of real code that is written on the ERP itself is very limited. It's mostly configurations. If any, it's the integration of these ERPs with the other legacy systems or anything else. That is what is really going through the Agile world. But I must confess, I do hear a lot of these conversations, more so with my own teams, because I think they also want to talk about Agile in the context of ERP, and few of our clients. But I don't really know if there is clear view on what is ERP and Agile world. My sincere view on this is that if it's pure ERP configuration, then it's just about faster releases and faster cycles to release, but you're not really going to be doing the entire coding from scratch and doing component level tests and so on. You could apply principles of Agile to say, okay, how do I not do a waterfall model which takes 6 months? I can have frequent releases to production and apply some concepts like backlogs and storyboards and so on. but it will be different from the traditional bespoke applications because you're really writing minimal code in ERP. You're just usually configuring it, or the code is for integration with legacy. So it's not pure ERP implementation.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, we've got another. So this is an interesting question, and it ties in again to a conversation I had in the run up to this webinar where perhaps a lot of engagements where people say this is agile, and actually it turns out it's got almost like 90% waterfall really because of the parameters and the stipulations set up around it and the gates that they have to meet as part of the project. We've got a question from Saurabh here, which is in many cases you end up doing hybrid, so waterfall and agile. How do you ensure test systems are stable? Do you create separate QA systems for manual and automation? So I don't know, Joe, if you've got any ideas on that one.
Yeah, I have a lot of opinion on this. I would argue that it typically is not hybrid. It's mini waterfall. What we saw early in our journey was that systems, instead of taking 6 months to be developed and then turned over to QA, they were developed in 2 weeks and then turned over to QA versus that continuous testing that goes through it. But in answer to the separate environment, no, we do not use. At LexisNexis today, we do not use separate environments for automation and manual testing. Given that, yes, there is stability issues in the environments. The ideal is that your CI/CD environment and your integration environments do become more stable over time, and that is a journey. But if you have robust automation tests that quickly identify that you have an issue, then that helps with your system stability. So in other words, if my automation can detect that I have a problem between asset A and asset B, I know that, okay, my environment is either my environment's unstable or I have a true integration issue. And very quickly you can start to make your environment more stable. That being said, you have to be able to control your deploys so that all your assets are deploying at a predictable time, and there has to be your automation needs to be integrated with that deployment process. So, we like to talk about at Lexis, our ideal is that we push a button, the code deploys, all of our tests run, and if those tests are all successful, then it deploys to production. Now, are we there today? Absolutely not, but that is the vision that we strive for, and that enables us to look back at our pipeline and bring that consistency to it little by little. It is a journey. It's not something an organization is going to achieve overnight. I've heard a lot of companies say that it's 2 to 3 years to implement that and get it working. That's an average. Some people are going to be able to do it faster. Some are going to take a little bit longer. It depends on your current culture and your current environments and really how much money you have to invest in making it successful.
That's cool. That's cool. So patience is key, which probably isn't helped by analysts like me starting off presentations talking about existential change. So here's an interesting question. I think this is a good one for you, Shashank. So with the advent of cloud, how are our test environments and test data management going to be different? And I guess second to automation, that's sort of another one of the industry kind of hype areas at the moment is cloud. So have you got any thoughts on that, Shashank?
Well, I think cloud will play a very important role. I spoke about in the context of quality engineering, how environments will be one of the key pillars for us to drive speed. One of the challenges in the existing world today is on-premise environments where the same environment is being looked upon by multiple teams to do tests at the same time, and that slows down things. So your ability to spin new environments, share what is already there, is always a challenge. And tied to that is also the people who are going to be administering those environments for you. Now with cloud, that provides a great opportunity for us to be able to spin off new environments for the testing that we need, have them available for the duration that we need it for, have them scale up and scale down depending on the size and the scope of the test. If you're doing smaller focused functional tests, you might need a smaller environment versus you're trying to run performance tests or something that is more data intensive, then you will need bigger tests. I think that's very important that we need to focus on. And I mean, the cloud will play a very important role in what we do. In fact, today, if you look at it, many of the tools, the testing tools that were available on-premise have themselves moved on to cloud. So you can use the tools on cloud, you can have the test environment in cloud, having minimum physical infrastructure that gives you the advantage of cost, that gives you the advantage of time, the flexibility that you want, can access anytime, anywhere. So cloud will play a very important role in we go forward. Today, a lot of our clients are using cloud. Some are still on-premise for security reasons, but majority of them have already moved to cloud. And tied to all of this, I think there's one other question that I was just looking through, is a very important thing in terms of, with all of this being said and done, what does it do to people, and do you need different skills in the mix? And I think both Joe and I spoke about it in our conversations earlier, that the skills in this world will be very different. They will be in addition to the traditional skills that we know of. We wanted people, and are there any top skills that are required in the context of digital and agile? Absolutely. I think the skill to have an analytic mindset, which is always required for testers, are going to be very important now. Technical skills, in addition to domain skills, are going to be extremely important now. Ability to work in teams is going to be so much more important than ever before, because no longer are you sitting across the wall testing some things. You are now an integral part of the team. One of the key reasons why QA can become can be seen as value adding to teams, because for most times people have felt that QA is across the wall, they slow things down, they only find problems and so on. But if our team members can bring the right technology skills, can bring the right problem solving analytic skills, and can demonstrate the right team working skills, not limited to just within the QA teams, but the larger team of developers, the product owners, the infra teams, and so on. And I think the acceptance of QA as a function, even in the construct of Agile and DevOps, will be very much appreciated than it is today. I hope that answered one of the questions that was also there in terms of top skills that may be required in the context of Agile world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So, I mean, we're just closing out on the hour. So what would be really handy is if I could grab two things from each of you that people can go away and do now. So all of the listeners we've had today and all of those that are listening in the future, two things that after this hour they can go away and do now, some quick wins. So maybe Shashank, if you could kick us off, what could they go away and do now?
I think the first thing that I would say is that recognition and not fear, right? Recognition that testing in the Agile world will be different. It will need a different mindset. It will need a different approach. It will need a different set of tooling and skills. It will be different, but it is definitely going to stay because it is relevant. And for those of us who are looking at testing today and expecting a binary answer of is it relevant or not, in its current form, probably not. But in the new form, even more. I think that's one of the message and the biggest message that I want the teams to take away, saying that this is here to stay in a new form and in a much bigger way, simply because the complexities are changing, our end customers are changing. We don't know what we don't know, and we are trying to test for those. Unlike the world before, where we exactly knew what we were looking for, and we would go a good job of testing that. So the world is very uncertain, and therefore I think the need for assurance and insurance that it provides is extremely important, and no other team than the QA team can provide it. But it will need a change in our thinking, our focus, our approach, our skills. And if we can do that, I think there is no question about the value that these teams can add in the Agile world.
Great, thank you. And Joe, what would you have people go away and do now?
I think this really ties into what Shashank said, but it's reskill. And not only you need to take your QA, reskill them on both the current tooling for automation, if they're not already automation engineers, reskill them in that space, and get them in a mindset of continuous learning, because the industry is moving very quickly, the tooling is changing very quickly, and the resources need to be able to reskill very quickly. And also, it is a mind shift and a skill shift for development and business as well. And I think that is an area where the industry is falling behind, and that is in reskilling the entire organization. And it's something that really is important in order to make your journey successful from the start, versus bringing in new people or struggling with it for years, that type of thing. So definitely reskill, and be prepared to reskill often.
Great, that's perfect. That sets us off perfectly. So Joe and Shashank, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you over the last hour. A big thank you to everyone who joined us today, and to everyone who will join us in the future. So thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.